Hi, we're standing in front of the Mitchell Courthouse awaiting the first motions to be argued for the Freddie Gray case. Most likely, defense lawyers are going to argue that Marilyn Mosby should be recused from the case because of a conflict of interest. And the second motion will be to move the case to another venue to be tried, implying that an impartial jury cannot be found within Baltimore City. Here with me is Eddie Conway, a former political prisoner and an executive producer here at the Real News Network. Hi, Eddie. Thank you so much for being with us here today.
Okay, thanks for having me.
I wanted to ask your opinion. In your experience, what do you see happening next in this trial?
Well, I think there'll be a lot of political maneuvering, and then I think eventually they will move the trial to a county area or area that's more friendly to the white officers and their plight. This had happened time and time again. It's been happening in California. It's the strategy that they use, and I believe they'll use it this time, and it'll end up exonerating most of the officers, most likely.
Does it seem to you that perhaps the African-American officers in this case perhaps are shouldering an unfair amount of responsibility for the death of Freddie Gray, or do you think that these charges are fairly applied?
No, I don't think the charges are fairly applied. I mean, we can see clearly from the video that three officers that beat Freddie, that caused the injuries that he sustained, that ultimately led to his death, were the three white officers. They are all charged with minor and lesser charges. The officers that transported Freddie Gray, whether it was negligent or not, he was already injured. He was injured, the damage was done. In spite of what the medical examiner says, it seems like it's an unfair application of the criminal charges. If murder charges was involved, then intent certainly had to be part of that issue. And those officers that transported him did not have the intent that the officers had that beat him.
Well, there's actually a possibility that this trial could go on for months, if not years. There's a possibility that each officer might get a judge trial instead of a jury trial, because they could argue that on behalf of their defense attorneys that any of the other statements made by officers would incriminate them or perhaps be contradictory to their own statements. So there's a possibility that each officer could be tried individually, which means this could literally take years to resolve. How do you think Baltimore City would react if we don't see some kind of justice within the next year?
Well, I think people in Baltimore, I mean, that particular case was the 111th case in the state of Maryland of people being killed by police, where police actually played the role of judge, jury, and execution. I think the state, people in the state are fed up. Certainly people in the black communities are tired. Majority of those cases, those 111 cases, the majority of them were people African-American descent. And it's hard to tell how young people will react, but if there's not a good positive resolution to this where people can see and believe that there's actual justice, even if those black officers get convicted and the white officers get community service, that's going to probably be a problem in Maryland, and it's probably going to be a problem across the country, really, because people across the country are tired of these kind of executions. Yeah.
The Vanguard, which is the Black Police Officers Union, there seems to that there might be a possibility of some tension between them and the FOP, where Gene Ryan is president of the FOP here in Baltimore City. The last time the Vanguard spoke, they spoke out for Alicia White, and they implied that the officers experienced racism within the police department and that they should do everything they can to protect one of their few black female police officers. Do you think this is a little convenient that the black officers, the Vanguard in particular, is talking about racism in the police department?
Well, no, I think that's how the Vanguard Justice Society was formed back in '74, I believe it was. Racism was rampant then in the police department, and black officers was getting the short end of the stick. They organized their own particular union. That union has been fighting for them. So it's institutional racism in the police department, as it is in police departments all across the country.
I just want to know, what would you like to see happen in this case? If you could be Judge Barry Williams, if you had control, what would you like to see? What would you like the outcome to be for these 6 police officers?
I would like the outcome to be a fair trial. I think the facts need to be laid out there. They need to be examined. A jury need to make a decision. I think a jury, given a fair and unbiased application of the law, would make a decision. I just think that there's probably too many factors involved, and there's going to be too much excluding certain people from the jury, which is their right to do, but that's going to happen, and the end result is going to be that there's going to be a minimum amount of responsibility. There's already a minimum amount of responsibility for the people that cause these injuries. No matter what happens to them, they can only be lightly punished for it, even if they're found guilty. So they're going to get away with murder, technically. The other people might get a more stiffer, stronger, strenuous kind of charges and sentences, but they are actually not the culprits. You got to look at the culprits. And if I was, and I'm not the judge, obviously, but if I was a judge, I would want to see that all the stuff came out in a fair and impartial manner.
Thank you. I guess my last question would be, our incumbent mayor, Stephanie Rawlings Blake, seems to have a lot of competition. Nick Mosby might be running, Carl Stokes, Weston, Sheila Dixon. There are a lot of people coming out saying they're going to be running for mayor. Do you think that this trial, the case of Freddie Gray and the uprising, has affected our mayoral race?
Perhaps it has. I mean, there was not a lot. There's 2 cities here. Baltimore is a city, a tale of 2 cities, a very rich and Eurocentric center, and a very poor, impoverished African descendant area. And in those 2 cities, in those 2 areas, Rawlings is very well liked by the business community. She is not that well liked by the people that's living in poverty in the areas of the city that's been neglected. And so there was always this hostility anyway. Certain people want her there and want her to continue to do their business, but other people don't see any benefits of having her, even though she's a black woman.
Eddie, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I suppose while I have you here, I'll just ask you one more question. Do you think that if this case is removed to another place, so if they succeed in getting their change of venue, if these defense lawyers actually successfully argue this, what do you think would happen if this case was moved to Howard County? What do you think? How do you think the Baltimore City residents would react?
I'm not sure how they would react, but I know if some convictions aren't handed down wherever it's moved to, there's probably going to be reaction from some of the people in the city, you know.
Thank you so much.